My name is Ruby Cole. I am 32 years old, and I live in a quiet apartment in the city. The crystal glasses clinked together, a sound that usually meant celebration. But for me, it sounded like a warning. My sister Evelyn stood in the center of the room, glowing in her white dress. Everyone was looking at her. I stood near the wall, holding a tray of empty drinks. That was my place. The background character. The shadow. Then Evelyn waved me over. The spotlight hit my face and my stomach turned. "And this," Evelyn announced loudly to her wealthy new friends, "is my little sister Ruby. She works at the courthouse. You know, answering phones, filing papers. Just admin stuff." The guests laughed. It was a cruel, dismissive sound. I didn't say a word. I never did. I just forced a tight smile and looked down at my shoes. It was easier to let them think I was nothing than to cause a scene. But one person wasn't laughing. Daniel, Evelyn's fiancé, was staring right at me. He didn't look happy. He looked terrified. His face went completely pale. He stepped forward, ignoring Evelyn. The room went quiet. "Wait," Daniel said, his voice cutting through the silence. You are the judge. But before I tell you how everything flipped, like and subscribe, drop a comment. Where are you watching from? My name is Ruby Cole. I am 32 years old. I have lived in a very small box for most of my life. It was a box built by my mother, painted by my father, and locked tight by my sister Evelyn. The box was labeled Ruby. And inside that box, the rules were simple. I was the quiet one. I was the plain one. I was the one who was steady, reliable, and boring. That was my role. Every family has roles, just like a play or a movie. You have the star, the villain, the comic relief. In my family, Evelyn was the star. From the moment she could walk, she demanded applause. If she drew a picture, it was a masterpiece that had to be framed. If she sang a song, we all had to stop eating dinner and listen. She was bright, loud, and colorful. She sucked all the air out of the room, and my parents were happy to give it to her. Then there was me. I was just Ruby. If Evelyn was the firework, I was the ground she stood on to launch herself. I was necessary, I suppose, but no one looked at the ground. You only looked at the explosion in the sky. When we were children, this dynamic was set in stone. If I got an A on my report card, my mother would smile vaguely and say, "That's nice, honey." Then she would turn immediately to Evelyn. "Evelyn, tell us about your dance recital. Did you get the solo?" I learned very quickly that my achievements didn't matter. They didn't have enough sparkle. They didn't make for good dinner conversation. So I stopped sharing them. I learned to be quiet. I learned to blend into the wallpaper. It was safer that way. If I didn't ask for attention, I couldn't be rejected. This continued into adulthood. The gap between us only got wider. Evelyn went into marketing. It suited her perfectly. It was all about image, flash, and talking loud enough to make people believe you. She was great at it. She made good money, wore expensive clothes, and dated handsome men who looked like they came out of a catalog. I went into law. But I didn't tell them that at first. When I was in college, I told them I was studying justice. My father nodded and went back to his newspaper. He didn't ask what that meant. He assumed I meant I wanted to be a police officer or maybe a social worker. He didn't ask, so I didn't elaborate. When I got into law school, I didn't tell them. I was living at home for the first year to save money. I would study late at night in my bedroom with the door locked and a towel stuffed under the crack so the light wouldn't show. I read thick, heavy books about contracts and torts and constitutional rights. My brain was on fire with ideas. I felt powerful when I read those cases. I felt like the world made sense in a way it never did at the dinner table. In the law, facts mattered. In the law, everyone got a turn to speak. In the law, the truth eventually came out. My family thought I was just reading. My mother would knock on my door and say, "Ruby, stop reading those boring books and come help your sister pick out an outfit for her date." And I would go. I would close my book on civil procedure, walk out of my room, and tell Evelyn that the blue dress looked better than the red one. I played my part. When I graduated from law school, they came to the ceremony. But it was a hot day, and Evelyn had a headache. She complained the whole time about the sun. My parents were worried about her hydration. They missed the moment I walked across the stage because my mother was fanning Evelyn with a program. I remember standing there, holding my diploma, looking at their empty seats. It hurt. It felt like a sharp stone in my chest, but I swallowed the pain. I told myself it didn't matter. I had achieved this for me, not for them. Then came the job. I started at the courthouse. It was a grind. Long hours, piles of paperwork, high stress. I loved it. I loved the order of it. One night at dinner, about a month after I started, my father asked, "So, Ruby, what is it you do down there at the city building again?" I opened my mouth to say, "I'm a lawyer. I'm working in the prosecutor's office." But before I could get the words out, Evelyn laughed. She was scrolling on her phone. "Oh, Dad, she's an admin. You know, filing papers, answering phones, helping the important people stay organized. It's perfect for Ruby. She loves organizing things." My father nodded, satisfied with that answer. "Admin, good, stable job, good benefits." I looked at Evelyn. She wasn't trying to be mean. She just genuinely believed that was the only thing I was capable of. In her mind, I wasn't smart enough or charismatic enough to be a lawyer. I was just Ruby. I was the helper. I could have corrected her. I could have slammed my hand on the table and said, "No, I am an attorney. I argue cases in front of a judge." But I didn't. I looked at my mother, who was already serving the pie. I looked at my father, who was watching the news on the TV in the corner. I looked at Evelyn, who was texting her boyfriend. I realized that correcting them would take so much energy. I would have to prove it. They would look at me with skepticism. They would ask a million questions, not because they cared, but because they doubted me. They would make me feel like I was lying. "Yes," I said quietly. "Admin. It's a stable job." That was the lie that sealed the box. From that day on, I was the courthouse girl, the admin, the secretary. Years passed. I worked harder than anyone I knew. I stayed late. I took on the tough cases. I built a reputation not as a flash in the pan, but as a hammer. I was relentless. I was fair, and I was smart. My colleagues respected me. When I walked into a courtroom, people stood up. Lawyers nervously checked their notes when they saw me on the opposing counsel table. I had power. I had a voice that rang clear and true in those high-ceilinged rooms. But on Sunday nights, I went to my parents' house for dinner, and I turned back into a mouse. "Ruby, can you refill my water?" "Ruby, did you hear about Evelyn's promotion?" "Ruby, you look tired. Is the filing getting to be too much?" I lived a double life. In one life, I was a force of nature. In the other, I was a piece of furniture. Then, the biggest moment of my career happened. A seat opened up on the bench. It is rare for someone my age to even be considered, but my record was spotless. The other judges liked me. They knew I was serious. They knew I read every page of every brief. I went through the vetting process. It was grueling. Interviews, background checks, committees. I didn't tell my family a single thing. Why would I? They thought I was answering phones. How do you explain to people who think you answer phones that you are about to become a superior court judge? When I got the call, I cried. I sat in my office, surrounded by my boring books, and I wept. I had done it. I was Judge Ruby Cole. I wanted to call my mom. I picked up the phone 3 times, but each time I heard her voice in my head. "That's nice, honey. But guess what Evelyn did today?" I put the phone down. I decided I would tell them when the time was right. I would wait for a moment when they were actually listening. But that moment never came. There was only one person who had an inkling. My cousin Lily. Lily was the black sheep of the family because she moved to Europe to be an artist. She only came back for holidays. Last Thanksgiving, Lily found me in the kitchen washing dishes while everyone else watched football. She leaned against the counter and watched me scrub a pot. "You're different, Ruby," she said. I looked at her startled. "What do you mean?" "You hold yourself differently now," Lily observed. "You walk like you own the place. But the second Mom or Aunt Susan walks in, you shrink." "Why do you do that?" I shrugged, scrubbing harder. "It's easier." "Is it?" Lily asked. "It looks painful. You're hiding something huge. I can feel it. You're like a superhero with a secret identity. Clark Kent and Superman, except you never take off the glasses." "It's just a job, Lily," I lied. "It's not just a job," she said softly. "I see you, Ruby. Even if they don't." I almost told her then. I almost broke. But just then, Evelyn burst into the kitchen. "Ruby, we're out of ice. Can you run to the store? Daniel loves his drinks cold and we are totally out." I looked at Lily. Then I looked at Evelyn. "Sure," I said. "I'll go get ice." Lily shook her head sadly as I grabbed my keys. That was the dynamic. That was the box. I was a judge who could sentence a man to 20 years in prison, but I was also the girl who was sent to fetch ice because the star needed it. I told myself it was fine. I told myself I didn't need their validation. But deep down, a quiet anger was building. It was a slow-burning fire, fed by every interruption, every dismissal, and every assumption that I was nothing more than what they wanted me to be. I was waiting for the lid of the box to crack open. I just didn't know I would be the one to blow it off. The dismissal wasn't a one-time event. It was a rhythm. It was the background music of my entire existence. It happened in small beats and loud crashes, over and over again, until I learned to dance to it perfectly. Family gatherings were the worst. I used to dread them days in advance. I would wake up with a pit in my stomach on Christmas morning or on my father's birthday. I knew what was coming. It was a script we had all memorized, and no matter how hard I tried to ad-lib, the other actors forced me back to my lines. My line was silence. I remember a specific barbecue last July. It was a hot, sticky afternoon. We were all sitting on the patio, my parents, Evelyn, her new boyfriend Daniel, and a few aunts and uncles. Everyone was holding a burger or a hot dog. The conversation was flowing, loud and fast. Evelyn was holding court. She was telling a story about a crisis at her marketing firm. "So the client calls me at midnight," Evelyn said, using her hands to emphasize the drama. "Midnight, and he's screaming that the shade of blue in the logo is too sad. Can you believe that? Too sad." So I had to wake up my entire team, get the graphic designer on Zoom, and we spent 4 hours finding a happier blue. It was a nightmare. I literally saved the account single-handedly. Everyone gasped. "Oh, Evelyn, you work so hard," my Aunt Susan said, shaking her head. "You really have a gift for people," my mother added, beaming. "Most people would have just quit. You have such tenacity." I sat there, eating my potato salad. I wanted to scream. Tenacity. Finding a blue color. Earlier that week, I had presided over a custody hearing that lasted 3 days. It was heartbreaking. I had to decide whether to remove 2 children from their mother's care because of neglect. I had listened to testimony that made my blood run cold. I had to be stoic. I had to weigh the evidence. I had to make a choice that would alter the course of 4 lives forever. When I banged my gavel, my hand didn't shake, but my heart was pounding. It took me hours to calm down afterward. I felt a sudden urge to share. I wanted them to know that I had tenacity too. "I had a tough week too," I said. My voice came out a little quieter than I intended. For a second, no one heard me. Evelyn was still laughing about the blue logo. "I had a tough week too," I said, a little louder this time. The table went quiet. Heads turned toward me. It wasn't an interested silence. It was a polite, impatient pause, like pressing pause on a movie to go to the bathroom. They were just waiting to hit play again. "Oh," my father said. "Did the copier break again, Ruby?" A few people chuckled. "No," I said, feeling the heat rise in my cheeks. "Actually, I had a really difficult case. It was a custody battle. It was very emotional. The mother was—" "Ruby, honey," my mother interrupted. She stood up and reached across the table. "Pass the ketchup, will you? Uncle Bob's burger is dry." I stopped. My mouth was still open. "The ketchup," she repeated, wiggling her fingers. I picked up the bottle and passed it to her. "Thanks," she said. Then she turned immediately back to Evelyn. "So, did the client like the new blue?" And just like that, I was erased. My custody battle, the weeping mother, the terrified children, the weight of the law, it was all shoved aside for a bottle of ketchup and a story about a logo. I looked down at my plate. I felt a familiar burning behind my eyes, the sting of tears I refused to shed. This is what it was like. When I spoke, eyes wandered. I could see it happen. My Aunt Susan would check her watch. My dad would start tapping his fork against the table, a nervous tick that meant he was bored. Evelyn would pick at her nails or check her reflection in her phone screen. They didn't do it to be cruel. I truly believe that. They did it because they had already decided I had nothing interesting to say. They had decided years ago that my life was small, simple, and flat. Why would they listen to the admin girl talk about legal procedures? It didn't fit the character they had cast me as, so I stopped trying. I built a fortress of silence around myself. I sat at these dinners, and I observed. I became an expert watcher. I noticed how my mother always refilled Evelyn's wine glass before her own. I noticed how my father always laughed at Evelyn's jokes, even the ones that weren't funny. I noticed how Evelyn used up all the oxygen, and how everyone else was just happy to breathe in her fumes. Meanwhile, my real life, my shadow career was exploding. I was getting awards. Judge of the Year from the local bar association. I had a plaque on my office wall. I had a heavy oak desk. I had bailiffs who would take a bullet for me. I remember one afternoon leaving the courthouse. I was wearing my black robe, walking down the hallway to my chambers. A young lawyer stopped me. She was shaking. "Your Honor," she said. "I just wanted to say, thank you, the way you handled that ruling. It was inspiring. You're the kind of judge I want to be one day. I smiled at her. Thank you, that means a lot. I felt 10 feet tall. I felt respected. I felt seen. 30 minutes later, I was in my car, driving to my parents' house for a birthday dinner for my dad. I parked the car, took a deep breath, and walked to the front door. As soon as I crossed the threshold, the robe disappeared. The Your Honor disappeared. Ruby, my mom yelled from the kitchen. You're late, the trash is overflowing. Take it out before the guests get here, it smells awful. I didn't argue. I didn't say, I just inspired a young lawyer today. I didn't say, I am a pillar of the justice system. I put my purse down. I walked into the kitchen. I tied up the garbage bag. It was heavy and smelled like old onions. I dragged it out to the curb. I stood there on the street, looking at the nice suburban houses. I looked at my hands. These hands signed warrants. These hands held the fate of criminals, and these hands were currently covered in bin juice. It was jarring. The transition was so sharp it gave me whiplash. I often wondered why I kept going back. Why did I subject myself to this? Why didn't I just stop showing up? I think part of me was hoping they would figure it out. I wanted them to see me without me having to scream it. I wanted my mother to look at me one day and say, "You look tired, but it's a good tired. You look like you've been doing something important." I wanted them to look past the label they had slapped on my forehead, but they never did. They were comfortable. The dynamic worked for them. Evelyn was the star and I was the staff. If I changed, it would mess up the whole system. If I was important, then Evelyn might be less important. If I was powerful, then my father's dismissiveness would look like foolishness. It was easier for them to keep me small. And for a long time, I let them. I facilitated it. I nodded when they explained basic politics to me, even though I knew the Constitution better than they knew their own addresses. I let them explain how loans worked, even though I ruled on bankruptcy cases. I let them treat me like a child, but the pressure was building. You can only compress a person so much before they explode. You can only ignore a judge for so long before she bangs the gavel. I didn't know the explosion was coming at Evelyn's engagement party. I thought it would be just another night of holding drinks and fake smiling. I thought I could survive one more night in the box. I was wrong. Evelyn's engagement party was not just a party, it was a production. It was held at a private estate overlooking the river. The gardens were manicured to within an inch of their life. There were string lights everywhere, thousands of them, glowing like captured fireflies. There were waiters in white tuxedos carrying silver trays. There was a string quartet playing soft, classical versions of pop songs. Everything was white, gold, and pale pink. It was beautiful, it was expensive, it was pure Evelyn. I arrived 20 minutes early. I knew better than to arrive on time. On time meant I was late for my duties. I parked my modest sedan between a Porsche and a vintage Jaguar. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. I was wearing a simple navy blue dress. It was elegant, professional, and understated. I had bought it specifically because it wouldn't draw attention. I didn't want to be accused of trying to upstage the bride-to-be. I took a deep breath, put on my family face, a mask of calm, pleasant neutrality, and walked toward the garden entrance. My mother intercepted me before I even reached the patio. She looked frantic. Her hair was sprayed into a helmet of perfection, and she was wearing a gold sequined gown. "Ruby," she hissed, grabbing my arm, her grip was tight. "Thank God you're here, it's a disaster." "What's wrong?" I asked. "The napkins," she said, her eyes wide with panic. The caterer put out the cream napkins, but Evelyn specifically asked for the ivory ones. "The cream clashes with the tablecloths. You have to fix it." "Mom, I don't think anyone will notice the difference between cream and ivory," I said gently. She looked at me like I had just suggested we burn the house down. "Evelyn will notice. Go. Run to the supply tent. Swap them out, now, before people start eating." She pushed me toward the service tent. So within 2 minutes of arriving, I was working. I found the ivory napkins. I went from table to table, swapping them out, clutching a bundle of cloth to my chest. I felt ridiculous. I was a 32-year-old woman. I was a judge. And I was sprinting around a garden fixing a napkin emergency that existed only in my mother's head. The guests started to filter in. These were not just family friends. These were Daniel's people. Daniel, Evelyn's fiancé, came from money. Old money. Serious money. His family owned half the real estate in the city. His friends were lawyers, doctors, politicians, and business tycoons. As I moved through the crowd, collecting empty glasses and straightening chairs, I caught snippets of conversation. They were talking about the market, about landmark legal cases, about city zoning laws. I wanted to join in. I heard a man discussing a recent ruling on property rights, a ruling I had actually written a dissenting opinion on a few months ago. I wanted to stop and say, actually, the precedent for that comes from State v. Miller. But I couldn't. I was holding a stack of dirty napkins. Evelyn appeared at the top of the stairs. She looked stunning. I have to give her that. She knew how to make an entrance. She paused, waiting for everyone to look at her. Then she descended, beaming with Daniel on her arm. She floated through the crowd, accepting compliments, flashing her ring. Eventually, she made her way to the group I was standing near. I tried to fade back, but she spotted me. "Ruby," she called out. She pulled me forward. "Everyone, this is my little sister, Ruby." The group smiled politely. "Ruby is such a help," Evelyn continued. "She's practically running this party behind the scenes. She works in admin, so she's obsessed with details." "Admin?" a woman in pearls asked. "Where do you work, dear?" "The courthouse," Evelyn answered for me. "She keeps the place from falling apart. Files, phones, schedules, you know how it is. Someone has to do the grunt work so the lawyers can be brilliant." She laughed. It was a light, tinkling laugh. The group laughed with her. "Well, it's good to have a job," the woman said condescendingly. "Exactly," Evelyn said. "We're very proud of her. She's so steady." I stood there, my smile frozen on my face. My hands were clasped behind my back so they wouldn't see my fists clenching. "Nice to meet you," I mumbled. "Go check on the bar, will you, Ruby?" Evelyn said, patting my cheek. "I think they're running low on ice." I turned and walked away. I felt the heat rising up my neck. It was humiliating. Not the job, there is absolutely no shame in administrative work. It is vital work. But it was the way she said it. The dismissal, the implication that I was less than, the way she used me as a prop to make herself look more successful by comparison. I went to the bar. I didn't get ice. I just stood there, breathing deeply, counting to 10. 1, 2, 3. "Are you okay?" I turned. It was Daniel. I hadn't spent much time with Daniel. He and Evelyn had a whirlwind romance. I had met him maybe 3 times briefly. He was handsome, quiet, and seemed decent. "I'm fine," I said, straightening up. "Just checking the supplies." Daniel looked at me. He was studying my face. He had a glass of scotch in his hand, but he wasn't drinking it. "You look familiar," he said. He narrowed his eyes. "I know we've met at family dinners, but you look familiar from somewhere else. Have I seen you downtown?" My heart skipped a beat. "I work downtown," I said carefully. "Right. The admin job," he said, but he said it slowly, like he was testing the word. "Evelyn says you handle the filing." "Something like that," I said. He looked at the way I was standing. He looked at my direct gaze. He looked at the lack of fidgeting. "You don't seem like an admin," he said. It wasn't an insult, it was an observation. "People surprise you," I said. "They do," he agreed. Before he could say anything else, Evelyn swept in. "Daniel. There you are, come on, the photographer wants a picture of us by the fountain." She grabbed his hand. She didn't look at me. "Ruby, make sure the trash is cleared from the cocktail tables, it looks messy." She pulled Daniel away. But as he walked away, Daniel looked back over his shoulder at me. He looked confused. He was trying to place a puzzle piece that didn't fit. The sun began to set. The string lights flickered on. The atmosphere shifted from afternoon mingling to evening elegance. The speeches were about to begin. I found a spot near the back, by a large potted fern. It was my usual spot. Out of the way. Visible enough to not be rude, invisible enough to be safe. I watched my parents laughing with Daniel's parents. I watched Evelyn holding court in the center of the room. It was a perfect stage. Everyone was playing their roles beautifully. I felt a strange sense of detachment. I felt like I was watching a TV show I used to love but had outgrown. I didn't belong here. I didn't belong in this box anymore. I checked my phone. I had an email from the court clerk regarding a docket change for Monday. I read it. The legal language calmed me. Motion to dismiss. Sustained. Objection. Real words. Powerful words. I put my phone away and looked up. Evelyn was tapping a spoon against her champagne glass. The sound rang out, sharp and clear. Everyone, can I have your attention?" she called out. The crowd hushed. The music stopped. All eyes turned to the golden couple. My stomach tightened. I hated the toasts. This was usually when the Ruby jokes happened. It was an easy way to get a laugh. Contrast the successful sister with the boring one. I braced myself. I prepared to smile. I prepared to be the punchline one last time. The air was still. The only sound was the distant flow of the river and the gentle clinking of glasses. Evelyn stood on a slightly raised platform, the microphone in one hand, Daniel's hand in the other. She looked radiant. She loved this. She loved the silence of a crowd waiting for her to speak. "Thank you all for coming," Evelyn began. Her voice was smooth, practiced. "It means the world to Daniel and me. We wanted tonight to be about love, about family, and about the future." The guests murmured appreciatively. She went on for a few minutes, telling the story of how they met. It was a polished version of the truth, edited for maximum romance. She made herself sound witty and charming. She made Daniel sound like a prince who had been waiting just for her. Then, she pivoted to family. "I have to thank my parents," she said, blowing a kiss to Mom and Dad. "You guys made me who I am. You taught me to dream big. You taught me that I could be anything I wanted to be." My parents beamed. My mom dabbed at her eye with a tissue. And, Evelyn continued, her eyes scanning the crowd until they landed on me by the fern. "I have to thank my little sister, Ruby." "Here it comes," I thought. "Ruby is the rock of the family," Evelyn said. "She's so grounded. You know, while I'm out there chasing big contracts and Daniel is closing deals, Ruby is the one making sure the world keeps turning. Someone has to answer the phones, right?" A ripple of laughter went through the crowd. It wasn't malicious laughter from the guests. They just thought it was a gentle sibling tease. But I knew the edge on it. "I mean, seriously," Evelyn laughed, encouraged by the audience. "We were talking the other day, and I was stressing about a venue, and Ruby just looked at me with that blank face she does. She did a mock impression of me, a slack-jawed, dull stare." The crowd laughed harder. "And I thought, wow, it must be nice to have a job where you don't have to think too hard," Evelyn joked. "Some people argue the cases, and some people just stamp the papers." "Right, Ruby?" She pointed at me. "Right, Ruby?" she repeated, expecting me to nod, smile, and play along. I stood there. My hands were folded in front of me. I felt a cold calm wash over me. It was the same calm I felt when a lawyer was trying to lie in my courtroom. It was the calm of absolute clarity. I didn't nod. I didn't smile. I just looked at her. The silence stretched out. It became awkward. The laughter died down. People started shifting in their shoes. Evelyn's smile faltered slightly. She wasn't used to me not playing ball. "She's shy," Evelyn added quickly, trying to recover the moment. "Administrative work makes you shy." She turned to Daniel, looking for him to join in to save the joke. But Daniel wasn't looking at the crowd. He wasn't looking at Evelyn. He was staring at me. His face was pale. The blood had drained from his cheeks. He looked like he had seen a ghost. He stepped forward, pulling his hand away from Evelyn's. He took the microphone from her, or maybe he just spoke loud enough that he didn't need it. "Daniel," Evelyn whispered. "What are you doing?" Daniel ignored her. He walked to the edge of the platform. He squinted at me despite the dim light. "Ruby," he said. His voice was serious. It wasn't the voice of a future brother-in-law making a toast. It was the voice of a man asking a question under oath. "Ruby, what exactly do you do at the courthouse?" The question hung in the air. My mother stood up. "Oh, Daniel, don't embarrass her. She's a clerk. She helps with the filings." "No," Daniel said, cutting my mother off. He didn't take his eyes off me. "I don't think that's true." He took another step closer. The guests were confused now. The tension was thick. "I was in court last year," Daniel said. "The zoning case, the big one, City v. Holloway." My heart hammered against my ribs. I knew that case. I had presided over it. It was a contentious land dispute. Daniel had been a witness for the defense. He had testified for 10 minutes. I had been wearing my glasses, my hair pulled back tight, my black robe swallowing my figure. I sat high up on the bench. He had sat low in the witness box. "I testified," Daniel said, his voice shaking slightly. "The judge," she was tough. She was brilliant. She tore the defense apart on a technicality regarding the survey lines. He looked at Evelyn, then back at me. "The judge's name," Daniel said slowly, "was Judge Cole." He looked at me. "Your last name is Cole." "Yes," I said, my voice was steady. "It is. And you work at the courthouse," he said. "Yes." "You don't answer phones," Daniel said. It wasn't a question anymore. It was a realization crashing down on him. "No," I said. "Daniel, what are you talking about?" Evelyn snapped. She looked annoyed. "She's an admin. Stop being weird." Daniel turned to Evelyn. He looked at her like she was a stranger. "Evelyn, your sister isn't a secretary." He turned back to me. The whole party was listening now. You could hear a pin drop in the grass. "You are the judge," Daniel said. "You are Judge Ruby Cole." I looked at my parents. My mother's mouth was open. My father was frowning, his fork suspended halfway to his mouth. I looked at Evelyn. She looked furious, confused, and suddenly very small. I looked at Daniel. "Yes," I said. "I am." The words rang out. Two simple words. Everything froze. It was as if I had dropped a bomb in the middle of the garden. The small box I had lived in for 30 years didn't just open. It shattered. The silence that followed wasn't the silence of dismissal. It was the silence of shock. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one looking down at my shoes. I was the one looking back. The word yes is usually a simple word. It is small. It is common. But in that garden, under the string lights, that one word weighed 1,000 pounds. Yes, I am. The sound of my voice didn't boom. I didn't yell it. I spoke it with the same quiet authority I used when I overruled an objection in my courtroom. It was a flat, factual statement. The reaction was physical. I saw it ripple through the crowd like a wave. First, there was the silence. It was a heavy, suffocating silence. The kind of silence that happens when a glass vase hits the floor but hasn't shattered yet. Everyone was holding their breath. I looked at my mother. Her face was a mask of pure confusion. Her mouth was slightly open, her lipstick bright red against her pale skin. She blinked rapidly, as if she were trying to clear a blurry image. She looked from me to Daniel, then back to me. I could see the gears turning in her mind. She was trying to reconcile the daughter she knew, the one she sent to fetch napkins, the one she interrupted at dinner, with the woman Daniel was describing. The math didn't add up for her. It was like watching a computer crash. My father was different. He lowered his fork slowly to his plate. It made a sharp clink that sounded like a gunshot in the quiet garden. His hand was trembling. He gripped the edge of the table. He looked at me with a mixture of fear and suspicion. My father was a man who prided himself on knowing everything. He liked to be the head of the household, the one with the answers. The idea that his quiet, admin daughter had achieved a position of high power right under his nose, without his help, without his advice, and without his permission shook him to his core. He looked betrayed. Then there was Evelyn. Evelyn didn't look scared. She looked annoyed. She let out a short, sharp laugh. It was a nervous sound, high-pitched and brittle. "Daniel, stop it," she said, swatting his arm playfully. "You've had too much scotch. You're confusing her with someone else. Ruby is, well, she's Ruby." She turned to the crowd, flashing her bright, stage-managed smile. "Sorry, everyone, Daniel is terrible with faces. He probably saw someone who looked like Ruby on the news or something." She tried to pull the microphone back. She tried to restart the script. She wanted to go back to 5 minutes ago, where she was the princess and I was the prop. But Daniel didn't move. He didn't smile back. He pulled his arm away from her grasp. "I'm not confused, Evelyn," Daniel said. His voice was cold. He was looking at me with a mixture of awe and embarrassment. I stood in front of her for 3 hours. I was cross-examined in her court. I know her voice. I know her eyes. He pointed a finger at me. Judge Cole denied the motion to dismiss in the Holloway case. She wrote a 20-page opinion on municipal zoning laws that is currently being cited in 3 other counties. My lawyers are terrified of her." The guests gasped. A murmur went through the crowd. These were wealthy, connected people. They knew what that meant. They knew the power of a superior court judge. A man in a tuxedo near the front, one of Daniel's business partners, stepped forward. He squinted at me. "Wait a minute," the man said. "Judge Cole, Ruby Cole," he turned to his wife. "Honey, isn't that the judge who presided over the merger lawsuit last spring, the one who sanctioned the bank for hiding evidence?" His wife's eyes went wide. She looked at me, really looked at me for the first time. She didn't see the admin girl anymore. She saw the posture. She saw the stillness. She saw the intelligence in my eyes that she had ignored 10 minutes ago. "Oh my God," the woman whispered. "It is." The whispers grew louder. "She's a judge. But Evelyn said she was a secretary." Why would they lie? Does the family not know? The shame shifted. For 30 years, the shame had been mine. It sat on my shoulders like a heavy coat. I was the disappointment. I was the one who didn't measure up. But in that second, the shame lifted off me. It floated across the air and landed squarely on my family. My mother's face went from confused to horrified. She realized what was happening. She realized that she had just spent the last hour treating a superior court judge like a servant. She realized she had sent me to get napkins while bragging about Evelyn's tenacity. She realized that every guest at this party, every important, wealthy person she was trying to impress, was now looking at her with judgment. Evelyn realized it too. Her smile vanished. Her face twisted into something ugly. "Ruby," Evelyn snapped, her voice losing its sweetness. "What is going on? Why are they calling you that? Tell them to stop." She commanded me. It was habit. "Ruby, get the ice. Ruby, fix the dress. Ruby, tell them to stop." I looked at my sister. I saw her clearly. I saw the fear behind her eyes. She wasn't angry because I was a judge. She was angry because I had stepped out of my role. I had broken the contract. I was supposed to be the audience, not the main event. I took a deep breath. The air tasted sweet. "I can't tell them to stop, Evelyn," I said calmly. "Because it's the truth." "You're lying," she hissed, forgetting the microphone was still near her. Her voice boomed over the speakers, shrill and desperate. "You work in the filing office. You told us. You said it was stable. You said it was boring." "I said I worked at the courthouse," I corrected her. "I said I worked in justice. You filled in the rest. You decided I was an admin. You decided I was boring, and I just let you." "Why?" my father barked. He stood up, knocking his chair over. "Why would you hide this? Why would you lie to your own family?" "I didn't hide it," I said. "I just stopped trying to make you listen." I looked around the garden. I saw the faces of the guests. They weren't laughing at me anymore. They were looking at me with respect. Some were even nodding. Daniel looked at me. "Judge Cole," he said softly. "I apologize. I had no idea when Evelyn introduced you. I just assumed." He trailed off. He looked at Evelyn with disgust. "You mocked her," he said to his fiancé. "You stood there and mocked a woman who has more power in the city than all of us combined." Evelyn went pale. "I didn't. I was just joking. It's our dynamic. She likes it. She knows I'm kidding." She turned to me, eyes pleading. "Tell him, Ruby. Tell him it's just a joke. Tell him we're fine." She wanted me to fix it. She wanted me to clean up the mess, just like I cleaned up the napkins. She wanted me to smooth things over so she could have her perfect engagement party back. I looked at her. I loved her, in a complicated, painful way. She was my sister, but I couldn't fix this. The truth is a permanent thing. Once it is out, you cannot put it back in the box. I shook my head slowly. "I'm not the admin, Evelyn," I said, "and I'm not the joke. Not anymore." The structure of my family was like a house built on a fault line. It looked solid from the outside, but deep down, it relied on a fragile balance. I was the bedrock that stayed still so Evelyn could build her towers. When I spoke those words, "Not anymore," the earth moved. The house collapsed. Evelyn stared at me. Her face flushed a deep, blotchy red. She wasn't used to being told no. She wasn't used to being contradicted, especially not by me. In her world, she was the sun, and I was a distant, cold planet. "You are selfish," Evelyn spat out. The guests flinched. The word hung in the air, ugly and sharp. "Selfish?" I asked. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The calmness was my armor. "Yes, selfish," Evelyn shouted. She gestured wildly at the party, at the flowers, at the stunned guests. "This is my night. This is my engagement. And you just had to make it about you. You just had to come here with your secret little victory and throw it in my face." "I didn't say anything, Evelyn," I pointed out. Daniel asked. "You were the one who brought me up here. You were the one who made the joke about me answering phones. You handed me the microphone." "You let me look stupid," she screamed. Tears were starting to well up in her eyes, angry tears. "You let me stand here and brag about myself while you were secretly laughing at me. You set me up." "I wasn't laughing at you," I said gently. "I was just standing there, being Ruby. The Ruby you created." Daniel stepped between us. He turned his back on Evelyn, effectively cutting her off from the crowd. He looked at her parents. "Did you know?" Daniel asked my father. "Did you know she was a judge?" My father looked trapped. He loosened his tie, his neck sweating. We knew she worked at the courthouse. We didn't know the specifics." "The specifics?" Daniel repeated, incredulous. "Being a judge isn't a specific detail, Robert. It's a career. It's a life. How do you not know your daughter is a judge?" "She never talks," my mother wailed, playing the victim. She slumped into her chair, fanning herself with a napkin. "She comes to dinner and she sits there like a mute. She never tells us anything. How were we supposed to know? She deceived us." "She deceived you," Daniel's voice rose. "I've been to your house for dinner every Sunday for 6 months. I've watched how you treat her. You interrupt her. You talk over her. You send her to the kitchen to fetch salt while you praise Evelyn for picking a color of blue." Daniel looked around the party, addressing his own family and friends. "We all laughed," he said, his voice heavy with guilt. "Evelyn made a joke and we all laughed. We laughed at a woman because we thought she was small. We thought she was just an admin." He looked at me. "I'm sorry, Ruby. I laughed too in the past. I didn't ask either." It's okay, Daniel, I said. It's not okay, he insisted. You deserve better. Evelyn gasped. She grabbed Daniel's arm. Daniel, whose side are you on? She's ruining our party. Daniel pulled his arm away again. This time the gesture was final. He looked at Evelyn, and the adoration that was usually in his eyes was gone. It was replaced by a cold clarity. She didn't ruin the party, Evelyn, Daniel said. You did. You brought her up here to mock her. You needed to make her look small so you could feel big. And now that you know she's big, you can't handle it. Evelyn froze. It was the truth, spoken out loud by the one person she needed to believe her illusion. The guests were shifting. The party was effectively over. The music had stopped long ago. People were putting down their glasses. They looked uncomfortable. They felt like intruders in a private family tragedy. I saw my Aunt Susan whispering to her husband. They were looking at me with wide eyes, then looking at my parents with pity. My parents had spent decades curating an image of a perfect, successful family. In 5 minutes, everyone saw the rot underneath. They saw the neglect. They saw the cruelty. My father stood up. He tried to regain control. He walked over to me, his face stern. Ruby, he said, using his father voice, the deep, booming tone that used to make me shrink. This has gone far enough. You have embarrassed your sister. You have embarrassed your mother. I want you to apologize. I looked at him. I looked at the man who had ignored my report cards, who had forgotten my graduation, who had never once asked me, "Are you happy?" I realized with a sudden jolt of freedom that I wasn't afraid of him. He was just a man, an old, insecure man who was terrified of losing control. No, I said. My father blinked. Excuse me. No, I repeated. I will not apologize. I haven't done anything wrong. I worked hard. I studied. I built a career. I became a judge. Those are good things, Dad. Those are things a parent should be proud of. I gestured to the crowd. The only reason this is embarrassing for you is because you never bothered to notice. My father's mouth worked, but no sound came out. He had no script for this. He had no line for a daughter who fought back. I think I should go, I said. I didn't wait for permission. I turned around. Ruby, wait, Evelyn called out, her voice cracking. You can't just leave. We haven't cut the cake. I stopped and looked back at her. She looked ridiculous in her expensive white dress, standing in the wreckage of her own ego. Enjoy the cake, Evelyn, I said. I'm sure it's delicious. I walked down the steps of the patio. The crowd parted for me. They didn't step aside like I was a servant carrying a tray. They stepped aside like I was royalty. They made a wide path. Good evening, Your Honor, a man murmured as I passed. Good evening, I replied, nodding to him. I walked through the garden, past the fountain, past the string lights. I walked to my car. My heart was pounding in my chest, a fast, rhythmic thud. My hands were shaking, not from fear but from adrenaline. I got into my car. I shut the door. The silence of the car was beautiful. It was my silence. I gripped the steering wheel. I looked back at the house. I could see the silhouette of my family on the patio, arguing. I could see Daniel walking away from Evelyn. I could see my mother crying. It was chaos. And for the first time in my life, it wasn't my job to fix it. I started the engine, put the car in gear, and drove away. The next morning, I woke up early. The sun was streaming through the blinds of my apartment. For a second, I forgot. I lay there in the quiet, feeling the soft sheets, listening to the hum of the refrigerator. Then it all came rushing back. The party, the microphone, the word judge. I sat up. I felt lighter, physically lighter. It felt like I had lost 50 pounds of dead weight during the night. I walked to the kitchen and made coffee. I poured it into my favorite mug. I stood by the window and watched the city wake up. It was a Sunday. Usually, Sunday meant anxiety. It meant preparing for the weekly dinner at my parents' house. It meant steeling myself for the comments, the chores, the invisibility. But today, I knew I wasn't going. I finally looked at my phone. It was sitting on the counter where I had left it the night before. The notification light was blinking frantically. I picked it up. 47 missed calls, 82 new messages. The numbers were staggering. I scrolled through the log. Mom 12 calls, Dad 8 calls, Evelyn 20 calls, Aunt Susan, Uncle Bob, Cousin Lily. I opened the messages. Mom, Ruby, answer the phone. We need to talk. Now, Mom, how could you do this to us? Evelyn is hysterical. Mom, pick up. Your father is very upset. Mom, Aunt Susan says she saw you in the newspaper last month. Why didn't you tell us? We look like fools. Mom, please call. We are family. The tone shifted from anger to victimization to desperation. Then there were texts from Evelyn. Evelyn, you ruined my life. Evelyn, Daniel left early. He won't talk to me. Evelyn, are you happy? You finally got your attention. Evelyn, I'm sorry, okay? I'm sorry. Just call Daniel and tell him it was a misunderstanding. She still didn't get it. She thought it was a trick. She thought I could fix the fact that I was a judge. Then there were texts from relatives I hadn't heard from in years. Uncle Bob. Ruby heard the news. A judge, wow, we are so proud, we should catch up soon. Cousin Mike, hey cuz, crazy news, congrats. By the way, I have a parking ticket, think you can help? LOL. I deleted Cousin Mike's text without replying. I listened to one voicemail from my father. Ruby, it's Dad. Look, we were surprised last night. It was a shock. You have to understand you've always been quiet. We didn't know you had this in you. Call us back. We want to. We want to celebrate. Yes, we want to throw a dinner for you. A judge in the family. It's a big deal. Call me. I laughed out loud, a dry, humorless laugh. Now they wanted to celebrate. Now that I was a trophy. Now that I was something they could brag about at the country club. My daughter, the judge, they didn't care about the work. They didn't care about the justice. They cared about the status. They wanted to steal my light just like they stole everything else. I didn't reply to anyone. I put the phone on Do Not Disturb. Around noon, there was a knock at my door. My stomach tightened. I thought it might be my mother coming to drag me back into the fold. I walked to the peephole. It was Daniel. He looked terrible. He was wearing the same clothes from the night before, rumpled and unbuttoned. He looked tired. I opened the door. Hi, he said. Hi, I said. He stood in the hallway looking awkward. Can I come in just for a minute? I stepped back and let him in. He walked into my living room. He looked around. My apartment was simple. Bookshelves filled with legal texts, novels, and history books. A comfortable gray couch. No gold statues. No white furniture, just a real, lived-in space. It's nice, he said. It's quiet. I like quiet, I said. He turned to me. I wanted to apologize again for everything for not knowing. You didn't have to come here, Daniel, I said. I did, he said. I ended it. I looked at him, surprised. You ended the engagement, he nodded. He rubbed his face with his hands. I sat there last night watching her, watching how she treated you, watching how she treated her parents, and I realized, I don't know her. I fell in love with a performance. I fell in love with the star. But the person underneath, she's cruel, Ruby. She's deeply insecure and she covers it up by hurting people. He looked at me intently, and I realized I was part of it. I sat at that table and let it happen, because it was easy, because I wanted to be part of the perfect family. But last night, when you stood up, I saw what real strength looks like, and it made Evelyn look hollow. She's my sister, I said, instinctively defending her. She's not a monster, she's been taught that she has to be the best to be loved. Maybe, Daniel said. But I can't marry a woman who treats her sister like a servant. I can't unsee it. He let out a long breath. Anyway, I just wanted to tell you, you are remarkable, Judge Cole, I hope. I hope your family figures that out. Thank you, Daniel, I said. He left. I closed the door and leaned against it. My family was falling apart. The wedding was off. My parents were in a panic. Evelyn was devastated. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel like I had to fix it. I realized that this wasn't my fault. This was the inevitable result of the truth coming to light. You cannot build a foundation on lies and expect it to hold when the wind blows. I was the wind, and I was done being still. 3 days later, Evelyn came. She didn't call first. She just showed up. I opened the door and almost didn't recognize her. She wasn't wearing makeup. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun. She was wearing sweatpants and a baggy t-shirt. I had never, in 32 years, seen my sister look like this. She looked normal, she looked human. She stood in the hallway clutching her purse. She looked smaller than usual. Can I come in? She asked. Her voice was small, raspy. She had been crying. I stepped aside. She walked in. She didn't look at the apartment. She walked straight to the couch and sat down, curling her legs under her. I went to the kitchen and got her a glass of water. I sat down in the armchair opposite her. We sat in silence for a long time. The clock on the wall ticked. Tick, tick, tick. Daniel is gone, she said finally. She stared at the floor. He packed his things, he moved out. I'm sorry, I said, and I meant it. I knew she loved him in her own way. He said, she swallowed hard. He said he didn't respect me, he said I was a bully. She looked up at me, her eyes were red and swollen. Am I a bully, Ruby? It was the first honest question she had ever asked me. I looked at her. I could have lied, I could have smoothed it over. I could have said, no, you're just spirited, you're just dramatic. but I respected her too much to lie to her now. Yes, I said softly. Sometimes, you are. She flinched. Tears spilled over her cheeks. Why didn't you stop me? She asked. Why did you let me treat you like that for years? Why did you fetch the drinks? Why did you let me call you admin? If you were this big shot judge. Why did you let me make you look small? Because it was easier, I admitted. And because I thought it made you happy, I thought if I was small, you could be big. And if you were big, Mom and Dad would be happy. I was trying to keep the peace, Evelyn. You weren't keeping the peace, she whispered. You were letting me become a monster. She wiped her face with her sleeve. I was always so jealous of you. I stared at her. Jealous of me. You're the star, Evelyn. You're the one everyone looks at. That's why, she said. I have to make them look, I have to perform, I have to be perfect. Every single day, it's exhausting, but you, she gestured to me. You were always just steady. You didn't need the applause. You could sit in a corner and read a book and be perfectly content. You didn't need them to tell you who you were. I hated that. I wanted to shake you. I wanted to make you feel as insecure as I felt. She looked at me with raw honesty. When Daniel asked what you did, and you said judge, I felt like I was shrinking. I felt like I was disappearing, because if you are successful, and you didn't need Mom and Dad's help, and you didn't need to shout about it, then what does that make me? I'm just a loud girl in a pretty dress. You're not just that, I said. You're smart, Evelyn, you're talented. You built a business. But I did it for them, she said, pointing vaguely in the direction of our parents' house. I did it for the applause, you did it for yourself, that's the difference. That's why Daniel left. He saw that you were real and I was just a reflection. She put her head in her hands and sobbed. I moved from the chair to the couch. I sat next to her. I put my arm around her shoulders. She leaned into me. She cried like a little girl. I held her. I was the big sister in that moment, even though I was younger. I wasn't competing with you, I said into her hair. I never wanted to beat you, I just wanted to be me. I know, she sobbed. I know. We sat there for an hour. She cried until she had no tears left. When she finally sat up, she looked exhausted but calmer. The frantic energy was gone. The Evelyn performance was gone. I don't know what to do, she said. My engagement is over. My parents are driving me crazy. They keep asking how we can spin this to make the family look good. I just want to run away. So run away, I said. Go on a trip. Go somewhere where no one knows you. Figure out who you are when you're not Evelyn the star. She looked at me. Is that what you did in the courtroom? Yes, I said. The law doesn't care about my family. It only cares about the truth. It was the only place I could breathe. She nodded slowly. She stood up. I'm sorry, Ruby, she said. I really am. I don't know if I can change overnight. I'm probably still going to be selfish sometimes. But I see you now, I promise. I see you. That's all I wanted, I said. She walked to the door. She paused. You know, Judge Cole sounds pretty cool. I smiled, a real, genuine smile. It is pretty cool, she left. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. We didn't braid each other's hair. Daniel didn't come back. My parents were still confused and shallow, but something had shifted. The dynamic was broken, and in the cracks, something real was starting to grow. I am still a judge. I still wear the black robe. I still sit on the bench and make hard decisions every day, but my life outside the courtroom has changed. I stopped going to Sunday dinners. I told my parents I would come once a month, on my terms. If they interrupted me, I would leave. The first time I did it, they were shocked. The second time, they listened. Now when I speak, they stay quiet. They don't understand me, not really, but they respect me. Or maybe they just fear me a little. That's okay too. I see Evelyn sometimes. She moved into a smaller apartment. She's seeing a therapist. We go for coffee. It's awkward sometimes, but it's honest. We are learning how to be sisters without the roles. I learned a hard lesson that night in the garden. I learned that silence doesn't buy you peace. It only buys you invisibility. I thought that by staying small, I was protecting myself. I thought that if I didn't challenge my family, they would love me. But they didn't love me. They loved the convenient version of me. They loved the doormat. By hiding my success, I wasn't being humble. I was being complicit in my own erasure. I was helping them mistreat me. There are so many people like me. I see you. You are the quiet one at the table. You are the one who fixes the problems while everyone else takes the credit. You are the one who swallows your words because you're afraid of rocking the boat. You are the one who has a whole universe inside you, talents, dreams, achievements, that your family chooses to ignore because it doesn't fit their narrative. I am telling you this now from the other side. You don't owe anyone a smaller version of yourself just so they feel bigger. You don't owe your parents your silence. You don't owe your siblings your submission. You don't owe the world a duller shine just because your brightness hurts their eyes. If you have been hiding your growth, stop. If you have a secret identity that you are proud of, share it. Put it on the table. Force them to look at it. Maybe they will celebrate you. Maybe they will be jealous. Maybe, like my family, they will fall apart. Let them fall apart. Because the people who really love you, they will want to know the real you. They will want to know the judge, not just the admin. They will want to know the artist, the writer, the singer, the CEO, the person you have become. Don't stay in the box. Break the lid. Stand up. Speak clearly. And if they ask you who you think you are, tell them. Tell them exactly who you are, and don't apologize for it. If you've been hiding your true self, or if you've ever felt like the background character in your own life, you deserve to be the lead. Share your story, and if this resonated with you, hit subscribe.